This is Elizabeth Davis, and what you are about to hear is not speculation. It is a crisis unfolding in real time across California's highways. After 4.5 years of legal warfare, the trucking industry just lost, and the consequences are shaking the foundations of American commerce. Right now, 70,000 independent truckers are being forced out of California. Not next year, not next month. This is happening today. If you care about supply chains, the cost of goods, or the future of American logistics, hit that subscribe button now. Like this video. And stay with me because what comes next affects every single person watching. The biggest carriers in the nation are not just warning drivers anymore. Companies like Landstar are telling truckers to pack up and leave California entirely. This is not a temporary slowdown. This is an exodus. The question everyone is asking is simple but terrifying. What kind of law is so extreme that it empties highways and cripples the busiest ports in America? The answer starts with a courtroom defeat that sent shockwaves through every dispatch center from San Diego to Sacramento. Dispatch centers lit up the moment the news broke. Within 72 hours of the legal defeat, carrier offices across the state scrambled into crisis mode. Landstar, one of the most respected names in freight logistics, sent urgent advisories to its entire network. The message was direct and unambiguous. California had become a liability. The new legal reality meant audits, fines, and the very real threat of retroactive penalties stretching back years. Drivers who had spent decades building relationships with California shippers suddenly faced an impossible decision: stay and risk financial ruin, or walk away from everything they had built. The conversations inside trucking offices shifted overnight. It was no longer about finding the next load or negotiating rates. It was about survival. Other carriers watched closely and made their own calculations. Some quietly pulled California freight off their load boards. Others issued warnings to avoid any shipment originating in the state. Owner-operators, many of whom had poured life savings into their rigs, watched their phones go silent. One driver described it perfectly. "One week I am hauling produce out of the Central Valley. The next week, nothing." The industry did not wait for enforcement letters to arrive. Risk managers and corporate attorneys ran the numbers and reached the same grim conclusion. Better to lose California business now than face six-figure penalties later. This was not panic. This was calculated retreat. Companies looked at the potential exposure and made cold business decisions. The cost of compliance was too high. The risk of non-compliance was catastrophic. So they did the only thing that made sense. They left. For independent truckers, the math was even more brutal. These were not corporate employees with safety nets. These were small business owners who had bet everything on their ability to keep moving freight. And now, through no fault of their own, the ground had shifted beneath them. The legal battle had ended, but it did not end in a dramatic courtroom moment. It ended in the quiet daily decisions of dispatchers and drivers who no longer saw a path forward on California roads. The law had spoken, and the market responded with an immediate and devastating answer. California had just lost 70,000 truckers, and the ripple effects were only beginning. To understand how we got here, you need to understand Assembly Bill 5. Signed into law in September 2019, AB 5 introduced something called the ABC test. On the surface, it seems simple. The test determines whether a worker is an independent contractor or an employee. To stay independent, a worker must pass all three parts. Prong A requires freedom from company control. Most owner-operators meet this easily. They choose their routes, maintain their own trucks, and run their businesses independently. Prong C requires operating an established trade or business. Again, truckers qualify. They invest hundreds of thousands of dollars in equipment, licenses, and operations. But then there is Prong B, and this is where everything falls apart. Prong B states that the work performed must be outside the usual course of the hiring company's business. For truckers leased to motor carriers, this standard is impossible to meet. Hauling freight is the core business of every trucking company. There is no way around it. The moment an owner-operator moves a load for a carrier, the law presumes that driver is now an employee. Under California Labor Code Section 2775, that presumption is automatic. There is no negotiation, no flexibility, no room for the reality of how trucking actually works. Other professions saw this coming and got exemptions written directly into the law. Doctors received carve-outs. So did insurance brokers, real estate agents, and engineers. But truckers got nothing. For 70,000 owner-operators, Prong B does not function like a legal guideline. It functions like a locked door with no key. The independence they spent decades building, the businesses they sacrificed for, the investments they made in equipment and reputation, all of it gets erased by a single clause in state law. These are not workers looking for employee status. These are entrepreneurs who chose the risk and reward of business ownership. And now they are being told that choice no longer exists in California. The law offers them two options. Become employees and surrender the independence that defines their livelihood, or leave the state entirely. For most, the choice is already made. They are leaving. Every statistic in this story represents a real person. 70,000 owner-operators means 70,000 individuals who took a risk on themselves. Some drive rigs worth $150,000 or more, financed through years of savings, through family loans, through sheer determination. These are not gig workers picking up part-time shifts. These are small business owners who shoulder every cost themselves. Insurance, fuel, maintenance, engine rebuilds. They bet everything on their ability to keep their wheels turning and their businesses profitable. Assembly Bill 5 does not threaten a job. It dismantles entire businesses overnight. For the carriers who work with these drivers, the economics are just as brutal. Converting an independent contractor to an employee is not a simple contract change. It means absorbing payroll taxes, health insurance, workers' compensation, and paid leave, all while covering the maintenance and fuel costs that drivers use to handle themselves. For a single truck, the added burden can reach tens of thousands of dollars per year. Multiply that across dozens or hundreds of drivers, and the math simply collapses. Most small and mid-sized carriers cannot afford that conversion. And most owner-operators cannot accept it. They did not build businesses just to become employees again. They built businesses for control over their schedules, their routes, and their income. Facing the loss of that control, they see no path forward in California. The law does not just change the rules of trucking. It eliminates the foundation upon which 70,000 small businesses were built. And it does so in one stroke, with no transition period, no compromise, and no recognition of the lives it upends. The result is not adaptation. It is abandonment. Truckers are not staying to fight this. They are leaving, and they are taking their rigs, their skills, and their economic contribution with them. California is not losing employees. It is losing entrepreneurs. And the difference matters more than the state seems to understand. Because when those trucks leave, they do not come back. And the consequences of that departure are about to cascade through every corner of California's economy. January first arrived with a new disaster. Across California, 473 gas stations closed their doors permanently. At the center of this collapse is Senate Bill 445, a state mandate requiring every fuel station to upgrade underground storage tanks. The cost per site can reach $2 million. For most small operators, that figure is insurmountable. The state promised help through a program designed to support struggling stations. But that program stalled under bureaucratic delays and mountains of paperwork. Owners waited years for assistance that never came. Meanwhile, the state's deadlines did not move, and the penalties for noncompliance did not stop. Every day past the deadline, station owners faced fines of $15,000 to $20,000. The math left no room for hope. Faced with impossible upgrade costs and relentless penalties, hundreds of family-run stations simply gave up. The closures hit hardest in rural communities. Stations that served as the only fuel source for 20 or 30 miles vanished overnight. Locked pumps, faded signs, empty lots where drivers once filled up before long hauls into the interior. For the trucks still operating in California, a new threat emerged. Not the loss of business, but the very real risk of running out of fuel in the middle of nowhere. Highway stretches that once had stations every 10 miles now have gaps of 50 miles or more. Drivers who used to plan routes around delivery schedules now plan routes around fuel availability. The fuel desert is no longer a distant concern. It is the new operating reality, written in the silence of shuttered stations and the growing miles between open pumps. Emergency responders are feeling the impact, too. Fire trucks and ambulances in rural counties now drive 30 miles just to refuel. That adds critical minutes to response times for fires, medical emergencies, and accidents. Corporate logistics teams are reworking entire supply chains to account for fuel uncertainty. Some are advising clients to avoid California routes altogether. The combination of fewer trucks and fewer fuel stations is creating a compounding problem. Even if a trucker wanted to stay and operate in California, the infrastructure to support that operation is disappearing. Then the refineries started closing. Phillips 66, a name synonymous with California fuel for over a century, shut down its Los Angeles refinery in October 2025. That single closure eliminated 139,000 barrels per day of refining capacity. That represents roughly 8% of California's entire fuel output, gone in one decision. 6 months later, Valero announced its Benicia facility would wind down operations by April 2026. That takes another 145,000 barrels per day offline. Together, these two closures erase more than 17% of California's total refining capacity in less than 12 months. Refineries are not just industrial sites. They are the backbone of diesel and gasoline supply. When a plant this large goes dark, the effects reach far beyond the property line. Fuel distributors scramble to find alternative suppliers. Trucking companies face tighter margins and higher costs. Workers who spent entire careers inside those facilities now face unemployment. And local governments lose millions in tax revenue. The loss of nearly 300,000 barrels per day means less diesel for the trucks that keep California's economy moving. As refining capacity shrinks, the system loses flexibility. A supply chain that once had buffer room now operates on razor-thin margins. Any disruption, whether it is a pipeline issue, a delayed tanker shipment, or unexpected demand, can send prices soaring or leave trucks waiting for fuel that simply is not available. California bet that it could force rapid change in its energy and labor sectors without major consequences. That bet is now being tested in real time. And the early results are not promising. Fuel prices are climbing. Availability is shrinking. And the infrastructure needed to support heavy industry is eroding faster than anyone predicted. The margin for error is disappearing. And in a state that moves 40% of the nation's imports through its ports, there is no room for error. The question is not whether this will cause disruptions. The question is how severe those disruptions will be and how quickly they will spread beyond California's borders. The ports of Los Angeles and Long Beach are the lifeblood of American trade. Together, they handle close to 40% of all shipping containers entering the United States. With a combined capacity exceeding 10 million 20-foot equivalent units annually, these ports depend entirely on a steady flow of trucks. Goods move from dockside cranes to warehouses, distribution centers, and rail yards. But that flow is breaking down. As owner-operators weigh the legal risks of staying in California and fuel stations close by the hundreds, fewer trucks are showing up to move cargo. Port supervisors and freight forwarders are tracking the shift in real time. Containers are stacking higher in terminal yards. Dwell times are increasing. And shipping companies are noticing. Some are quietly rerouting contracts to ports in Texas and along the East Coast. The calculus is straightforward. Pay premium rates for the shrinking pool of California trucks. Or move operations to states where the logistics infrastructure is stable. Shipping line executives are not making emotional decisions. They are making financial ones. The ripple effects are spreading. Warehouses that depend on timely container deliveries are facing delays. Retailers are seeing gaps in inventory. And manufacturers are paying more to move raw materials and finished goods. What starts as a California problem quickly becomes a national issue. Because the ports of Los Angeles and Long Beach are not just regional hubs. They are the primary gateway for goods coming from Asia. Electronics, clothing, automotive parts, consumer products. All of it flows through these two facilities. When those ports slow down, the entire country feels it. Corporate supply chain strategists are now warning clients about unpredictable delivery schedules. Some are advising companies to build larger inventory buffers. Others are recommending alternative shipping routes entirely. California's dominance as a logistics powerhouse no longer feels secure. The infrastructure that made the state indispensable is crumbling, and competitors are taking notice. Ports in Houston, Savannah, and Newark are investing heavily in capacity expansions. They see an opportunity, and they are moving fast to capture market share that California is losing by default. This is what a perfect storm looks like. Not a single catastrophic event, but a series of policy decisions that collide in devastating ways. Assembly Bill 5 drives out 70,000 truckers. Senate Bill 445 closes hundreds of fuel stations. Refinery shutdowns eliminate 17% of the state's fuel supply. And the ports, once untouchable in their dominance, begin to buckle under the weight of it all. The state did not plan for this convergence. Each policy was pursued independently with separate justifications and separate political coalitions. But the consequences do not care about intent. They care about reality. And the reality is that California is paralyzing the very supply chain that moves 40% of America's imports. The delays are not theoretical anymore. They are measurable. Containers are sitting longer. Trucks are harder to find. Fuel is more expensive and less available. And companies are making long-term decisions to move their business elsewhere. This is not a temporary disruption that will resolve itself. This is a structural shift. And once that shift is complete, reversing it will be nearly impossible. The true cost of these policies is only beginning to surface. 70,000 truckers forced out, 473 gas stations closed, 2 major refineries shut down, and the ports that power the American economy now face an uncertain future. California built its logistics infrastructure over decades. It became the envy of the world. But infrastructure is fragile. It depends on people, fuel, and capital. And when policies drive those elements away, the system does not adapt. It breaks. The question now is whether California will recognize the scale of this crisis before it becomes permanent, or whether the state will continue down a path that prioritizes ideology over the economic reality on the ground. For the truckers who have already left, the answer does not matter. They are gone. and they are not coming back. If you found this analysis valuable, subscribe to Elizabeth Davis. Leave a comment below with your thoughts on what California should do next. Share this video with anyone who cares about the future of American logistics, because this story is not over. It is just beginning, and the decisions made in the coming months will determine whether California remains a logistics powerhouse or becomes a cautionary tale of what happens when policy outpaces reality.